In the latest episode of HR Visionaries, we're going to talk to Shannon from Alto. We're going to talk about what kind of difference the people at Alto make for their communities. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today, Shannon. It's great to have you.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
And you tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you?
Who am I? So my name is Shannon Wilson, and I am the Chief People Officer at Alto Pharmacy. If you think bigger than that, I always tell people that I am Mitch's co-pilot. I am a puppy mom. I am my brother's only sister, a doting aunt, an involuntary artist, a watcher of wildlife, a lifelong student, an aspiring storyteller, and an introvert that values connections. So just a small list of things I'm trying to accomplish in this lifetime.
Okay, right. So that was way too fast. I couldn't write everything down. So, but first of all, wildlife watcher. What kind of animals do you watch?
My favorite right now is birds. I've been birding a lot lately, and I'm fortunate because I live up here in the Pacific Northwest, and we get a fair bit of migration through the Northwest. And so I get to see all sorts of birds that make their way through. And what I love about birds is that there's a lot of them that if you're not paying attention, you'll miss because they're small or they're fast moving, but they're brilliant. So that's my favorite right now.
And it's also super interesting that they have a great sense of direction and they apparently know where to go, whatever the season is.
Yes. There are some birds that make, miles and miles of migrations seemingly on instinct. Like they know that that's what they have to do every year. And it's just fascinating to me.
You mentioned you're the Chief People Officer of Alto Pharmacy. Did you always want to become a people leader?
I probably should have known that I wanted to. When I was younger, I wanted to be a teacher, and there's a certain amount of teaching tied with people leadership. Mm-hmm. In fact, as a child, my mom tells a story about how my teachers would often sit me next to children that were struggling in school because I would lean over, I'd get my work done, and then I'd lean over and help them. And so I probably should have known that this was my calling, but it actually took a few of my mentors coming to me. And finally, one just said, I think you're missing your calling. You need to learn more about HR. So I took some courses and got intrigued, and the rest is history, as they say.
So what did you do before you took over roles in the people area?
So I started my career out, I was a journalism major, and then I started my career out in operations. And I love seeing how things work. I love digging into the details of things. And I always had a deep passion for math. And operations gives you plenty of that. I know you're from a finance background, so you likely share that love of numbers. Probably much bigger skills than I have there, but I just always enjoyed math. And so operations brought together that combination of how do things work and how do things add up. And I enjoyed that a lot. And then I met mentors through the years that just kept sort of nudging me, and eventually I moved into HR and have made several sort of lateral steps throughout my career between operations, HR, tech, and science. And in the role that I'm in today, I think it serves me incredibly well to have that diversity of experience that I can apply to any challenge that I'm facing or anything that my team needs me to lead them through.
Well, indeed, nowadays people, the people function has quite a fair share of, well, analytics, fair share of numbers. So it was probably quite those were very important skills to learn and then to apply now in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. A few years ago, I was approached. I was an HR generalist at the time. I was leading the Western US, so a fairly large organization, and I was approached about taking over a very, very small team of tech and science. In fact, there were no scientists on the team at the time, just a handful of engineers and program managers. And they said, we need data for worldwide ops HR, and we just don't have it. And I remember thinking, like, why are you coming to me? Because I don't have this background. I don't have this education. And I realized it was because I was one of the most vocal people on the team about the need for HR to be speaking from a place of data, and that technology was coming and we needed to be comfortable with technology. And so I thought, okay, well, this role both excites me and terrifies me. So I probably should do it. There's usually like goodness at the intersection of fear and excitement. So I did the role. I loved the role. And to your point, HR has become more and more analytical, more and more tech. Uh, and that experience, that expertise has served me not only as an HR leader, but now in the C-suite. I have partners in the product and tech and science organizations. And so when I'm in their reviews, I feel like I can contribute and sort of put that product and tech hat on. Certainly not to the extent that they have it, but I can put that hat on and really help them look around corners and think about what they're trying to do. But it's definitely coming into HR. And I'll tell you, it hasn't always been an easy, like, HR hasn't always welcomed it with open arms, right? You're trying to do some disruption there too, right?
Indeed, and that's what I wanted to ask. Well, obviously, data in the field of HR is incredibly important. I would even argue it's much more important than in other areas, given, well, nowadays, people are the main asset of the vast majority of companies. Therefore, well, knowing what people want, knowing how to engage people, knowing how to keep people happy. What's the reason they stay with us? What's the reason they are some people are more productive than others? It's absolutely key to have the right amount of data and to have the right data. So how can companies that struggle with harvesting all these information, how can they do this?
I think there's lots of ways that you can do it. And to your point, the power of data, especially now that we're living in a world of big data, it can send signals to you long before a leader can see that signal. I grew up, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I grew up in a time of like management by walking around, and you would get this sense that, this part of your shop floor was just a little bit off, or you'd walk into this building, you'd think something really good's happening here. But it was very much intuition based, and it was, and I don't mean intuition in the sense that you're guessing. It's years and years of doing the job. You see signals, and your brain doesn't
then,
get quite
right?
connect. Your brain sees the dots and it's telling you there's something there, but it isn't quite making the connection. Data can do that for you, and so having that is incredibly powerful. And I've been fortunate. I've worked with 3 large, iconic consumer brands. So of course, large workforces, they're in a position to have that kind of data. Some of us aren't. My current role, I lead an organization of about 1,100 as a startup. And so I do not have the deep pockets that those large consumer brands had, and I don't have all the data. But I have found that there are fundamental things you can do to get information flowing and to learn from it. And one of my favorite things to do is to create feedback loops. And They can be very sophisticated. There's a lot of science behind things like engagement surveys now. There's a lot of science behind candidate selection now. So they can be very data rich and sophisticated, or they can be something as simple as giving a place for employees to make comments and ask questions that everyone in the company can both see and what's being asked and what leadership is saying in response.
Well, since you have that math background, I'm wondering, how do you deal, or how have you dealt in your career with people who were a bit reluctant in, in obeying the numbers, or in, or at least, being open to suggestion? Because, I just noted down. So basically, in a nutshell, what you just described is, previously it was leading by instinct or by experience, and that kind of translates then to instinct after some time, and now it's leading by data. How do you make sure that those people who have led previously by experience and by instinct now are open to lead by, to let data lead the way?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. What I've found is, first of all, I'm a big believer in the three-legged stool when it comes to business leadership. It's operations, finance, and HR, because business can't do anything without the people and the money. And so those three have to be connected. And with that group, I've generally found that ops and finance, understandably so, are more open and have an expectation of data, right? Like that's, it's the foundation of finance, for goodness sakes. And so oftentimes I would start with those two groups because I knew that they would embrace data. And for the longest time, I struggled, especially when I was leading my tech and science team, to find ways to get HR to embrace. And I couldn't quite understand it, not just data, but products. The introduction of new products. In fact, I remember at one point we had a seemingly months-long debate about enabling the self-service function that allowed employees to submit why they quit. And it even got the name, the I quit button, which makes it feel so much more ominous than it is. But most of your human capital management systems have a self-service resignation option. We had always kept that disabled at the company I was at the time, and we debated it because there was this fear that if you put that out there, it'll just make it easy for people to quit, and you'll just have droves of people quitting. And so we had built up this fear in our heads about doing that. What ultimately happened was that people started using it, and what we learned was not that we had more terminations or resignations. It was that we started to understand better why they were leaving, because they were telling us, rather than, especially if you work with large hourly workforces in the United States. I know Europe doesn't face this as much. Europe has more challenges, in my experience, with attendance than attrition, but in the States, you really struggle with attrition among large hourly workforces. One of two things happen. Either the resignation is getting submitted by a member of HR management. So there's a lens that it's going through, a filter it's going through. So, if someone tells their manager they're leaving because they don't like their manager, is the manager incentivized in any way to submit that as the term reason? Probably not. But so that's the first one. You have some automatic defects there. And then if you make it hard for people to say, hey, I'm moving, or I found a better job, or something's changed in my life that I need to leave, at least in the States, they'll just disappear. They'll ghost you, and you won't know why they left. And so ultimately embracing that technology allowed us to get better understanding and better data. And if you want to retain people, you need to understand why people are leaving. And just as much as you need to understand why people are staying. And so that was an example where we had sort of built up in our heads worst case scenario before we enabled that. And I'm glad that we did it. And every role I've had since then, I've had the dreaded I quit button is live and active so that people can say in their own voice why they're leaving. But I think that experience helped me understand there's a lot of professions out there that are incentivized to be nearly perfect or to drive towards perfection. HR is one of those, right? Like, make sure the employee experience is perfect. And if you look at it from a business lens, we're also incentivized to make sure that we're avoiding risk, or we're mitigating and minimizing risk. And now sort of position that across from product management, which is incentivized to create a minimally viable product. Now, I'm a fan of the minimally lovable product, but minimally viable product. And there's nothing in sort of the HR profession DNA that says minimally viable is okay. And so once I realized that, it's why I've become such a fan of minimally lovable, is you have to give them something that's meaningfully better than what they have today. And also approachable enough that they'll embrace it. That's why minimally lovable is my favorite. But it's that's what I've come to realize, is there's something sort of about the goal of the profession that puts us at odds with the fundamentals of product management and product creation. Does that resonate with you at all? Because you come from a profession that needs perfection as well.
Yeah, kind of. So if there's a booking error, it could be very expensive indeed. And it does absolutely resonate. And the thing is, one question I had, so with regards to the I resign button or I quit button. I can't help, but I do understand those people who are reluctant to activate such a button. And as you said, so it's super useful to get all these insights. I totally buy that. However, how did you overcome the internal resistance? How did you overcome these, these fears that were well founded, I guess?
Yeah. There were a couple things. The first one was, I believe that there was this perception that every time someone quit, they received this high touch dive and save conversation. And in some cases that was true. Certainly the more senior a person is in their role, the more likely that high touch, why would you leave? Is there anything we can do to get you to stay, happened? But it was less and less common at the more junior levels, because that's pretty sophisticated and complex conversation to have. And so the closer we got to the front line,
inconvenient, right? An inconvenient conversation you don't want to have, actually.
Right. Because you could possibly hear things you don't want to hear. Like, you could get a mirror held up to you that is not a good reflection.
It's you.
And so the closer we got to the front line, the less frequently we found that was actually happening. So that was the first thing, is to sort of bust this perception that this wonderfully well-rehearsed and executed conversation was happening every time. And then use the fundamentals of science, which is do a test. We have a hypothesis that this will not change our attrition numbers. We have a hypothesis that this will actually lead to better insights as to why people are leaving. We can stair-step into this. And so we enabled it for a very small number of locations. We got worked with the scientists to get a good cross-sampling of buildings that had all sorts of past trends. And we didn't see the numbers increase through that. Instead, we saw the reason codes shifting meaningfully, and we got better information. And from that, we were able to say, okay, now that we have this, how do we make this lightweight enough that people will complete it, but detailed enough that we get all the information that we want from it? And so that was a journey that happened over months. And I'm sure the team, I've long since left that team, but I'm sure they're still learning from that work. But it was, there are moments when you can flip the switch and change everything at once. And there are moments when you should take a more measured approach. And one of the mental models that I've used for years that I learned from a past employer is this idea of a one and two-way door. And if you're walking through a one-way door, you want to be really thoughtful because you can't go back. If you don't like what happens, you can't go back. Well, the I quit button is completely a two-way door. If we did the pilot and suddenly we had people leaving and our attrition spiked up, we can just turn it off. The only people that will know are the handful of buildings that we selected to pilot. And over the course of months or a year, most would have forgotten that we ever had it because they didn't actually quit. And so it was absolutely a two-way door, but we had to show the team that perceptions may not be accurate. We can do this in a really thoughtful and measured approach. And it's two-way. If we don't like what happens, we can turn it off and go back to the way we were. So there's no reason not to try.
No reason not to try. Okay, that's a very very cool thing to say. Can you tell us a bit about what's currently on your mind? So what is something you're looking into at the moment very closely?
A few things. So I'm in Alto is a digital pharmacy, and we have a mission of fulfilling medicine's true purpose for all those who need it. And so that means at the center of all we do is the pharmacist. And that consumes a lot of my time. This is my first time in the healthcare industry. I've worked in consumer brands, and there's certainly a degree of consumer care when you're helping patients. In fact, even more so because this is their health and well-being that you're talking about. But the pharmaceutical industry in the U.S., pharmacists have faced a lot of challenges in the last few years. There aren't as many pharmacists as they once were. Companies are getting squeezed to be able to survive because it's a low margin business. And so you see mom and pop pharmacies closing, and even some of the larger chains, Rite Aid in the United States closed down a bunch of locations just in the last 12 months. And so it's an industry that is in flux, and it's an industry in need of disruption. And so I think about my pharmacists. The pharmacists consume a lot of my time, and I have found interesting parallels because they have that same commitment towards perfection, right? You can't send a patient home with the wrong medicines or the wrong dosage of the medicine. And so I feel a connection with them, and I'm working very hard to learn that profession and to see how we can bring tech and data and science into the pharmacy world and claw out some of the administrative work that puts a huge burden on those experts. And how can we help them operate at the top of their license and really be doing the things that, quite frankly, they entered the profession to do, which is to meet with patients and make sure they have the care and guidance that they need to get the full benefit of the medicines that their doctors are prescribing. And so that's something that's consuming quite a bit of my time right now. Understandably, we're also a startup, so there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that the company is successful. And so we're constantly looking at things that we can do to iterate the experience and the business model so that we continue to attract more and more customers, more patients, more providers to our business, so that we can meet self-sustainability, which we have a path to doing that in the next 12 months, which is incredibly exciting as a startup. And then I think the third thing that I'm really focused on right now is, because we see that profitability line on the horizon, a lot can happen once a company hits that milestone. It's a significant milestone. And so I'm working very hard to make sure that our processes and mechanisms are set such that we can scale and that we're prepared for any possibility once we hit that milestone.
Well, attracting people in such an environment where you look at an industry, as I said, that needs this disruption, that is in some parts quite traditional, in some parts quite also highly regulated. How do you approach people to join a startup that are they used to work in a very mature environment?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. And in fact, one of the people that convinced me to come to Alto, her name is Stacy, and she works at our Bellevue Pharmacy. She had worked her career at one of the large chains, and she became a pharmacist because she wanted to help people. And once she stepped into the role, after several years of doing that, she found herself sort of finding that she was spending more time on the phone with providers, more time on the phone with payers, insurance companies, government agencies, trying to get all the necessary coordination and approvals just to give the patient the medicine. And you have to have all that before you can give them the medicine, much less tell them, and this is how you use it. And these are the things you should watch out for. These are the things you can expect. This is the benefit that will come from that. So before she could get to the stuff that she really loved and that she wanted to do, she had all this other stuff that was bogging her down. And when she had her first child, she shared with me that she stepped away from the profession for a while because she wondered if she had made a mistake because she wasn't spending her time really providing that high level of care for a patient. And when she learned about Alto, we actually got her to re-enter the workforce because our mission and our approach resonated with her so much that she thought, yeah, they understand what needs to change and they're trying to change it. I want to help. And to hear that from her she was quite literally the last person I talked to before I made the decision to come to Alto. And to hear her firsthand voice an experience that many of us have had, which is the doctor says, do this. And then you show up at the pharmacy and you can't do that because your insurance doesn't want to pay for it, or your government assistance doesn't cover that net or whatever. And then you get caught in this loop. And unfortunately, that's usually on the patient's shoulders or the pharmacist's shoulders. And so to hear her see that what we were trying to do was very much needed and that she believed some of the things we were doing were the right way to do it. And so I thought, I want to come help.
How do you communicate this to potential new candidates, new employees?
I think the easiest way to do that, not that it's easy, but the easiest way to do that is with our values. We have a handful of values that guide everything that we do. And those values are embedded into our processes. They inform our decisions. They help us choose between what we're going to do. And what I do is when people say, hey, I'd like to come to Alto, the first thing I say is you should read our values. And then you should watch our founder video. And if those two things resonate with you, then this might be a good place for you. And we kick off the process. But I always nudge people towards those two things to say, is this the place for you? And I think what resonates with people, especially from the founder video, is they hear Jamie and Matt talk about, wanting to make the world a better place, wanting to contribute, and they felt like medicine is one of those places you can do that. And they get to see the many hours that they spent really learning the job of the pharmacist and understanding the industry. We even intersperse some of the pictures from those early days into that video so that they can see it. And so they know that we do want to honor the profession and the industry. We're not just a bunch of sort of scrappy kids over here thinking we know better. We want to honor what they're trying to do. We just want to help make it easier than it's been.
I think what just mentioned, so it's not just new kids around the block and who know better than those people who have been in the profession for decades. That's incredibly strong, right? So to say, hey, well, we have something to learn, however, we have also something to offer, and that's perhaps our openness, our our approach towards technology and so on.
Yeah, and it was one of our founding, one of our very early values was to be humble. And it was chosen because when you come into to change something, to disrupt something, there's an inherent sort of, I know better. And that was one of our founding values, because we said, we can't just sort of walk in with a lot of false bravado and just start breaking things and seeing if it works. And so that guided us for a long time. We recently refined that value, and it's now seek to understand. And we felt that mirrored our culture a little bit more, and it was about that natural curiosity that you have to have no matter what situation you're in. And that curiosity is what served us to make sure we understand what needs to be done before we go sprinting about trying to do it.
And I have a last question for you. So when you picture the world in 5 years, in particular in the HR space, what do you see?
5 years in the HR space.
It's a very long time, I know.
Yes, I know, especially as quickly as technology is evolving. I see technology becoming, I think we all knew that technology would lift sort of the administrative, the simple, mundane tasks off of our plate. But it really is moving into becoming an assistant. It's helping us understand the frequent decisions that are being made, and in many cases taking that off of our plate for us as well. And so what that leaves for not just HR, but I think tech is becoming this partner for all sorts of professions, pharmacy, finance, operations management included. It becomes this assistant that helps you, and it sort of claws the stuff off for you. It highlights signals. It helps you make decisions that you've made 1,000 times before, so you can focus on the really high judgment, high curiosity, high creativity things that have to be done when you're breaking new ground. And so that's exciting to me, is really unleashing technology to be that partner for us in so many different ways.
Yeah, I think
huge. Long time in tech years.
Indeed, and it's just said it's beautiful, given it's kind of liberating people to be creative and to be who they are, instead of forcing them to do boring stuff where they can't exploit all the power that their brain has. So I think it's really cool what you just said.
Yeah, and it's not just boring stuff. It's unsafe stuff. Robotics is coming in and replacing things that are unsafe. So we're protecting each other with technology. It's, in my space, things like computer vision are incredibly exciting, because that could be that little lens over your shoulder sort of saying, this pill looks like that pill. It's exciting what it can do for you. And that's where it's that real partnership, rather than a replacement. It's that partnership.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much. It was amazing talking to you, and also understanding your positive outlook for the future. And thank you so much again. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thanks all of you for listening in, and see you next time.